Now, this next scene is very important, and we've discussed this so many times on the
Yes.
show. And this is when your father receives the gift from your grandfather and the artistic licensing taken by production. And so I'll play it, and then we'll discuss it.
Do not trade this. Ever.
The old 45 revolver.
45 will stop a Jap better than a clip in your carbine. You hit one of the suckers in the hand with that, take his arm right off. You write your father a nice thank you note for that.
What is the artistic licensing that production took with this particular artifact, and what does the real artifact look like, Mr. Henry Sledge?
Okay. Well, let me turn the lights up for this one.
Sure.
If you are interested in seeing the actual 45, the actual weapon that my grandfather sent to my dad that he actually carried through combat. Now, actually, the way they do it here, it shows him he would have carried this through Peleliu. What in fact happened was my grandfather sent this to my dad after Peleliu, so he carried it through Okinawa. So a little bit of time adjustment, but this 45, 1911, model 1911, 45 caliber pistol, Springfield, is the actual pistol that my grandfather sent to my dad while he was on Pavuvu.
Do you think they changed it to a revolver because maybe I have two theories. One would be this is being sent to your father by your grandfather who's a civilian, and maybe they thought the audience would think it was weird that he had access to a quote-unquote military-grade gun because they did issue the 1911 to the NCOs in the Army and Marine Corps? Or do you think it was kind of a nod to the revolver scene in Band of Brothers?
I don't think it had anything. That's an interesting thought about the revolver scene in Band of Brothers. I don't think it had anything to do with that. When the production team began getting ready for the Pacific, I remember a gentleman calling me. We had a conversation about this pistol. I sent him pictures of it. I described it. Because as you can imagine, it's a prized possession, and I would like to see it in a museum so that everybody, because I think people would enjoy seeing that. But when I didn't know until I saw this scene that they changed it to a model 1970 45 caliber revolver. And I mean, look, we've talked about it, like you said, Don. We've discussed this many times, and Bruce McKenna and I've laughed about it now. And I love the show for what it is, and I'm fine with it. But at the time, you know, I was a little hypersensitive to some things, and I actually got really angry with Bruce. And I'm like, Bruce, what happened? I mean, and that was beyond Bruce's control. I mean, I've really never gotten a great answer on here's why it was changed to that. Here's who made that decision. He intimated to me that it might have been Dale Dye who made that call, but I really have never gotten a clear answer on that. So if I'm being vague and ambiguous, it's because that's all I have to go on.
I can kind of understand you being a little annoyed because, as you said, you took time, you got it out, you took photos, you sent descriptions. Yeah. You actually participated in some historical accuracy and providing detail, took time out of your day and sent this stuff, and for kind of nothing.
I guess at the time I looked at it like that, but now I don't look at it like that. I mean, look, I mean, I'll never know. And I actually met Dale Dye at the Band of Brothers Symposium August a year ago in New Orleans. And I was sitting right by him. I could have said, okay, Dale, what's
the deal with the revolver?
Yeah, well, what the hell was that deal with the revolver instead of the fork? But I didn't do that. I mean, whatever. I mean, look, man, I've done a reread on Helmet for My Pillow, and when I look at the things that have been changed from that for reasons that we've already kind of touched on, that kind of stuff happens. I mean, artistic license, character, composite characters, scene compression. Who knows why they do what they do sometimes? I mean, really, when you step back and look at the totality of it, I mean, they did a great job of hewing to the truth and maintaining the the essence of the character of who Eugene Sledge was and who Sid Phillips was. I mean, they did a great job with that stuff.
And so now we see at least the miniseries explanation of when they really first met, with the exception of the "it's been taken" scene.
You assholes gonna miss cleaning out oil barrels pretty soon. Jobs pouring shit for fire, crying boo-hoo, wishing you were back here with nothing asked of you but to scrub oil out of drums.
Why don't you grab a brush?
Fuck that shit, I scrub drums for no man.
Can we take a break?
Do whatever you want, this ain't my detail. I like to watch the new guys sweat.
That's kind of a great scene to show when you have young men bored with nothing better to do, the delight that can come from harassing the new guys.
Yeah.
And it kind of shows character development too with Snafu.
I really, the whole oil drum thing was such a big deal because those drums have been used for tank fuel and amphibious tractor fuel. So either diesel fuel or regular gas. The Amtraks did not have diesel engines; they had gas burning engines. Some of the tanks had gas engines. Some of them had diesel engines. Either way, I mean, you're talking about some nasty stuff in those drums. I know that was a big deal that I talked with Bruce about all that, and I think there was a scene that probably got cut because we see him scrubbing the drums,
But you don't know why. And this is a
you don't know
foreshadowing
why.
scene that becomes very important later on down the series. But they don't.
Right, and I think they had a scene on Peleliu where they're just dying of thirst and in 115-degree heat, and begging for water, and then they get what they got. And I don't, for whatever reason, I think they cut that scene. We just didn't get that.
Yeah, because in the book, your father makes reference to when they finally got the water and it was tainted. He kind of refers back to that situation where he's like felt guilty, like when I was scrubbing barrels and I half-assed the job. Was my barrels had that same impact on some marine on some other island, whereas whoever cleaned these barrels clearly half-assed the job, and now we're suffering through it.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure that there was a scene shot for the final cut, and for whatever reason, it just didn't make it. But water, and this is probably a good time to point out because I think we touched on how some of these deprivations and some of these horrific conditions cause actual behavioral changes in these men later on, like we were talking about with the character Gibson. I know in my dad's case, I never saw that man go anywhere without a container of water. I don't mean a military canteen. I don't mean that. But if we got in the car to go 30 minutes up the road to run an errand, to go shopping or whatever, he would have a container of fresh water.
By today's standards, young cats hearing that's nothing new. Their mom walks around with a 30-gallon Stanley cup. We all have a hydro flask, as we'd say. But back then, even when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, you didn't carry potable water with you. Maybe you had that Boy Scout nerd who had the canteen, but normal everyday people did not. We just drank when we got to where we were going. We didn't have this whole fascination like we have nowadays where people have to be hydrated 24 hours. But because your dad lived through it and knew what it was like not to have water.
Now, my dad didn't carry massive bottles of water like that, but he had a container of fresh water with him all the time.